The sun was just beginning to rise over the vast Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The land stretched endlessly, dry and rough, dotted with thorny bushes and tall, sharp cacti. In the distance, the sound of cattle lowing echoed faintly. The rancher, a man weathered by years of hard work under the scorching sun, was walking along the edge of his property. His boots crunched on the dry earth, and he adjusted the wide-brimmed hat that protected him from the early morning heat. Life on the ranch was never easy, but it had always been steady until today. As he approached the small bend in the river, something unusual caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a bundle of discarded cloth or perhaps a stray animal. But as he drew closer, he realized it was a young girl. She was sitting on the ground, her hands tied behind her back, and her legs bound with a coarse rope. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves around her face, and her brown eyes shone with a mixture of fear and determination. She did not cry or beg. Instead, she sat silently, waiting for him to notice her. The rancher stopped a few steps away, unsure of what to do. He had seen many things in his life, but a young girl, alone in the desert, tied up and unafraid, was something he had never encountered. He studied her carefully. Her clothes were simple, made from cloth that looked like it had been patched many times, and she was barefoot. Despite her condition, she held herself upright, her chin lifted, as if she were challenging him to do something, anything. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was strong and steady, not trembling with fear as he had expected. "Untie me. I will serve you with all I have." The rancher froze. Her words struck him like a sudden gust of wind. Serve him? How could a child speak such words? He glanced around nervously, expecting to see someone hiding in the shadows, ready to attack, but there was no one. Only the sound of the river flowing gently and the whisper of the desert wind through the dry grass. He took a slow step closer, still keeping a hand near his belt where his knife rested. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously. The girl did not hesitate. "I am Apache. My name is Aylin." Her words were simple, but there was a weight to them, a seriousness that made the rancher pause. He had heard stories of the Apache, their bravery, and their skills in surviving the harsh desert lands. He had always respected them from a distance, but he had never met one up close. And now, here was a young girl, speaking to him with confidence, and daring him to either believe her or walk away. The rancher knelt slowly, keeping his eyes on her. "Why are you tied up?" he asked. Aylin's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained calm. "I ran from those who wanted to harm me. I escaped, but they will come for me if they find me. I am asking for your help. Not for mercy, but because I can help you too." The rancher studied her, his mind racing. He had spent many years alone on the ranch. He knew the land better than anyone, and had faced danger many times, wild animals, storms, and even bandits. But he had never faced a situation like this. Helping the girl could bring trouble, yet leaving her tied there felt wrong. Her courage and determination stirred something in him he had not felt in years, a mix of curiosity, concern, and a strange sense of responsibility. Carefully, he reached out and untied the ropes that bound her hands and legs. Aylin rubbed her wrists and flexed her fingers, showing no sign of weakness. She looked at him with a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Thank you," she said simply. The rancher nodded, still unsure of what to say. "Why me?" he asked. "Why come to my ranch?" Aylin stood slowly, dusting off her patched clothing. "Because you are here. You have the land, the cattle, and the means to survive. And I know things about this land that can help you, just as I hope you will help me." Her words were honest, and though the rancher was cautious, he could sense that she was not lying. There was something about her presence, an energy, a sharpness that told him she was capable, resourceful, and brave. He motioned for her to follow him, and she did, without hesitation. As they walked toward the rancher kept glancing at her, noting her careful movements and alert eyes. She seemed to notice everything: the tracks in the sand, the distant shapes of birds, the subtle sounds of the wind. It was clear she knew the desert well, and he realized that her skills could be valuable. When they reached the ranch, the rancher's dogs barked, sensing a stranger, but Aylin calmly approached them, speaking softly and offering gestures of reassurance. Even the animals seemed to accept her. The rancher watched in quiet amazement as she moved with confidence, almost as if she belonged there already. That night, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, the rancher sat by the fire outside his small cabin. Aylin sat nearby, her face illuminated by the flickering flames. He studied her silently, thinking about the day's events. He could not deny that she had a certain strength and intelligence, but he also knew that trusting her fully would take time. Aylin seemed to sense his thoughts. "I will not cause you trouble," she said quietly. "I only ask for a chance to show you what I can do. I am strong, and I can help you with the ranch. I know the land, the water, the animals. If you let me, I will serve you with all I have." The rancher felt a mixture of surprise and admiration. Few people, especially children, spoke with such conviction. Her determination reminded him of the resilience needed to survive in this harsh desert. He nodded slowly, deciding to give her a chance, though he still remained cautious. Over the next few days, Aylin proved her worth. She helped with chores around the ranch, guided the rancher to hidden water sources, and showed remarkable skill in tracking lost cattle. She worked tirelessly, not out of obligation, but out of a desire to prove herself and repay the trust he had shown. The rancher, in turn, began to let his guard down, realizing that her presence was not a threat, but a gift. By the end of the first week, a bond began to form between them, not just of survival, but of mutual respect. The rancher had never met anyone like Aylin. Her courage, intelligence, and unyielding spirit challenged him to see the world differently. He began to understand that sometimes help came from the most unexpected places and in the most unexpected forms. As the stars appeared in the night sky, the desert calm around them, the rancher thought about what the future might hold. He knew that trouble could still come, perhaps from the girl's pursuers, or from the harshness of the land itself. But for the first time in many years, he felt a sense of hope. With Aylin by his side, the ranch was no longer just a place of work and survival. It had become a place where courage and loyalty could flourish, and where unexpected friendships could change the course of life forever. And so, the desert night continued, with two unlikely companions sitting by the fire, each silently promising to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. The next morning, the desert seemed even brighter, the sun rising slowly over the horizon and casting a golden glow across the ranch. The rancher, whose name was Thomas, awoke earlier than usual. He had spent the night thinking about Aylin, the Apache girl who had appeared so suddenly and confidently in his life. There was something about her presence that made the ranch feel different, less lonely, less quiet, and somehow more alive. As Thomas stepped outside, he found Aylin already up, her dark hair tied back, her eyes scanning the horizon as if she could read the land itself. She moved with purpose, collecting firewood and carrying it carefully to the small hearth outside the cabin. Thomas watched her silently for a moment, amazed at her efficiency. She seemed to know exactly what needed to be done, without being told. Aylin noticed him watching and gave a small smile. "The animals need water," she said softly, "and the sun will be hot soon. We should finish chores early." Thomas nodded, impressed not only by her knowledge of the land but also by her understanding of timing and preparation. He had always known the desert was unforgiving, but Aylin's awareness of every small detail reminded him that the land demanded respect and attention. Together, they moved toward the watering troughs where the rancher's cattle were gathered. Aylin's movements were careful but confident. She knelt down near a young calf and gently examined its legs. Thomas approached slowly, unsure if she needed help, but she waved him away. "I know how to check them," she said, her voice calm but firm. "See? This one is fine, but the older cow over there might be tired. She needs rest and a little extra water." Thomas followed her gaze and realized she was right. He felt a strange mixture of admiration and surprise. Few people, even adults, would notice such small details. Yet Aylin, a young girl who had arrived as a stranger, seemed to understand the needs of the animals instinctively. As the morning passed, Aylin showed Thomas more of her skills. She pointed out hidden water sources along the riverbank, explained which plants could be eaten safely, and demonstrated ways to guide cattle without startling them. Thomas listened carefully, learning from her quietly. He realized that the knowledge she carried was not only practical, but essential for survival in this harsh desert environment. During a brief rest under the shade of a tall mesquite tree, Thomas finally spoke. "Aylin, how did you learn all this?" he asked. She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the sunlight. "The desert teaches you," she replied. "My family, my people live here. We watch, we listen, we move carefully. Every plant, every animal, every wind and rock tells a story. You only survive if you understand it. You cannot fight it. You must work with it." Thomas nodded slowly. He realized that her life had been far different from his own. He had grown up learning the ways of the ranch, but her lessons were deeper, rooted in generations of living with the land itself. It made him respect her even more. Not just for her skills, but for the life she had lived, shaped by courage and awareness. As they returned to the ranch, Thomas noticed something strange in the distance, faint tracks leading through the dry sand. He paused and motioned for Aylin to come closer. "These tracks," he said carefully. "They're fresh. Someone passed by here recently. Could it be?" Aylin studied the tracks carefully, squatting down and tracing them with her fingers. "Yes," she said quietly. "They are from horses, and they are moving toward the river. They are not far. They could be the ones I ran from." Thomas's heart tightened. The thought of her pursuers finding the ranch filled him with unease. But Aylin, though tense, did not panic. She stood tall, her posture firm and confident. "I have seen them before," she said. "I know how to move quietly, how to hide, and how to guide you if they come close. But you must trust me." Thomas hesitated. Trust was not something he gave easily. Life on the ranch had taught him to be cautious, to rely on himself, and to doubt strangers. Yet, looking at Aylin, he felt a strange certainty. She had already proven herself with her knowledge and courage. He nodded slowly. "I will trust you," he said, surprising even himself. Over the next few days, the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Aylin worked alongside Thomas, helping with chores, tending the animals, and guiding him through parts of the land he had never fully explored. She taught him how to find the best grazing spots, how to read the desert for signs of weather changes, and even how to move silently to avoid startling wildlife. Thomas learned quickly, but he also noticed that Aylin's lessons went beyond simple skills. She taught him patience, observation, and the value of careful planning. One afternoon, while checking the fences along the northern edge of the property, they heard a distant sound. The thump of hooves against dry earth. Thomas froze, and Aylin's eyes sharpened. "They are here," she whispered. Before Thomas could react, Aylin motioned for him to move quietly behind a ridge. From their vantage point, they could see a small group of riders approaching, scanning the land. Thomas recognized the danger immediately. These were not friendly travelers. Aylin's expression was calm but serious. "They will come closer," she said softly. "We cannot fight them openly, but we can use the land to our advantage. Follow my lead." Thomas followed her instructions carefully. She guided him to hidden paths, showing him rocks and brush that would conceal them. When the riders came near, they passed without noticing the two of them. Thomas was amazed at her skill and foresight. The girl had saved them both without a single act of aggression. That evening, back at the ranch, Thomas finally allowed himself to relax, sitting by the fire and reflecting on the day. Aylin sat across from him, cleaning tools and arranging supplies with precise movements. "You are remarkable," Thomas said quietly. "I have never met anyone like you. You see things others do not. And you move through this land as if it belongs to you." Aylin looked up, her face serious. "It is not about belonging," she said. It is about respect. The land gives life, and life must be respected. I have learned this from my family, from my people. You must always be careful, always aware, or you will lose what is precious. Thomas nodded, understanding her words on a level deeper than he expected. It was not just about surviving the desert. It was about understanding it, working with it, and respecting its power. And in Aylin, he saw a guide, a teacher, and a friend all in one. As the days turned into a week, their partnership grew stronger. Aylin proved that her abilities were not limited to survival. She had a keen mind for solving problems, an understanding of animals that went beyond instinct, and a courage that inspired Thomas. Slowly, he began to open his heart, realizing that the desert was no longer just a place of work and solitude. It had become a place of learning, growth, and unexpected companionship. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned deep purple, Thomas and Aylin sat quietly on a hill overlooking the ranch. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant water. "You have changed this place," Thomas said softly. "Not just the ranch, but me. I never realized how much I needed someone like you." Aylin looked at him and smiled faintly. "We help each other," she said simply. "I learn from you, and you learn from me. That is how we survive, how we grow. Trust and respect, they are more important than fear." Thomas nodded, feeling a warmth he had not felt in years. For the first time, he truly understood that life on the ranch was not just about work, survival, or solitude. It was about connections, courage, and learning from those who walked beside you. As the stars appeared and the desert night settled in, Thomas realized that he had found more than a helper in Aylin. He had found a companion who would challenge him, teach him, and inspire him to see the world differently. And though he did not yet know the full story of her past, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. The next few days brought a quiet tension to the ranch. The desert, which had once felt calm and predictable, now seemed to hum with an unseen energy. Thomas noticed the subtle changes, the way the wind shifted in the evening, the distant echo of hooves far off, the occasional rustle among the scrubby bushes that made his heart quicken. Aylin, however, seemed unshaken. She moved through the ranch with her usual confidence, though Thomas could see her eyes scanning every shadow, every movement, every detail of the land. One early morning, just as the first rays of sunlight brushed the tops of the cacti, Aylin called Thomas to the edge of the northern pasture. She was crouched low, her eyes focused intently on the tracks in the dry earth. "Thomas," she said quietly, "they are close. I can smell the horses, hear their approach before you would. We have little time." Thomas felt a cold knot in his stomach. He had feared this moment, and yet here it was her pursuers had found them. He looked at Aylin, who met his gaze without fear. "We need a plan," she said. "We cannot fight them directly. They will have numbers and weapons. But the land can help us." Thomas nodded. He had always relied on his knowledge of the desert, but he realized quickly that Aylin's understanding of it went far beyond his own. She led him to a hidden trail between two ridges, a path that twisted and dipped, shielding them from sight. The ridge provided a natural barrier, and Aylin pointed out stones and brush that could mask movement. "They will ride past here first," she explained. "Stay low, follow my instructions, and we can remain unseen." The thrum of hooves grew louder, and Thomas's heart raced. He crouched behind a large boulder, watching the figures of several riders emerge from the dust. Aylin's eyes were steady, her hands guiding him silently. The riders passed within a few yards, oblivious to the two hidden observers. When the last horse disappeared into the distance, Thomas exhaled deeply. "How did you know to hide here?" he asked in awe. Aylin smiled faintly. "The desert speaks if you listen. Every track, every sound has meaning. They think they are fast, Clever. But the land is older than them. It remembers. For the next few days, the tension persisted. Thomas and Aylin worked together, preparing the ranch for any possible encounter. She reinforced fences, dug hidden trenches, and moved the cattle to safer grazing areas. Thomas realized that every action she took was calculated, thoughtful, and precise. Aylin's understanding of strategy, combined with her courage, gave him a new sense of security he had never experienced before. But the desert was not their only concern. Thomas noticed that Aylin often stared at the horizon with a faraway look in her eyes. He knew she was thinking about her past, the people she had fled, and the family she had left behind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the western hills, he asked gently, "Do you ever miss them?" Aylin's expression softened, and for the first time, Thomas saw a hint of vulnerability. "Yes," she admitted quietly, "but I also know I must survive. My people, my family, they will understand why I ran. And I must protect them by being strong here." Thomas nodded, understanding more about her than he had before. She was brave not only in facing danger but in carrying the weight of responsibility for her family. It was a courage that went beyond physical skill. It was the courage to endure, to plan, and to face fear without letting it control her. One afternoon, as the sun blazed overhead, a new threat appeared on the horizon. A small group of riders, more numerous than before, approached the ranch. This time, Thomas felt the full weight of fear. They were not strangers now. They were pursuers who sought Aylin, and perhaps anyone who helped her. Aylin noticed his tension and placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Thomas, we have faced this before," she said calmly. "We will face it again. But remember, courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it." Together, they prepared. Aylin led Thomas to a hidden ridge that overlooked the main entrance to the ranch. She positioned him behind a cluster of rocks, while she moved to a small outcropping nearby, where she could observe the riders without being seen. "They will come in small groups first," she whispered. "Watch the leader. He signals the others. When they separate, we can guide them away without being seen. Follow my lead." The riders approached, kicking up dust that drifted like smoke across the desert. Thomas's heart pounded in his chest, but he followed Aylin's instructions carefully. They moved silently, staying out of sight, and slowly, the riders passed without discovering the ranch. When the danger had passed, Thomas let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I don't know how you do it," he said, shaking his head. "You are incredible." "Kata," Aylin simply shrugged. "I have learned from the land," she said, "and from my people. Observation, patience, and timing. The desert teaches all who listen." As the days went on, Thomas noticed how much he was learning from her. Her lessons extended beyond survival. She taught him the value of awareness, the importance of thinking ahead, and the strength that comes from quiet confidence. Every time they worked together, he felt himself growing not just as a rancher, but as a person capable of courage, strategy, and trust. One evening, as the sky turned a deep indigo and stars began to glimmer, Aylin led Thomas to a small lookout point. From there, they could see the entire ranch and the surrounding land. She pointed to the distant hills, the river winding through the desert, and the grazing cattle. "Everything is connected," she said softly. "The land, the animals, the water, the wind. If you understand these connections, you can survive almost anything. But you must respect them, or you will fail." Thomas listened intently. Her words carried more than practical knowledge, they carried wisdom. He realized that her life had been shaped by challenges far greater than anything he had faced. And yet, she had chosen not only to survive but to serve, to help him protect the ranch, and to share her knowledge without expectation. Days turned into weeks, and life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Aylin's presence had become a part of the landscape, as natural as the desert itself. She worked tirelessly, guiding Thomas through daily tasks, teaching him to read the land, and preparing for any danger that might come. Thomas, in turn, learned to trust her judgment completely. He had faced many challenges in his life, but none had tested him as much as this partnership with a girl who was both teacher and companion. Despite the constant threat of pursuers, Thomas began to notice moments of peace. Early mornings spent checking cattle, afternoons walking the trails, and evenings sitting by the fire with Aylin became moments of reflection and learning. He realized that courage was not only about facing enemies, but also about embracing life fully, with its responsibilities and uncertainties. One night, as the desert settled into quiet darkness, Aylin sat beside the fire, her face illuminated by the flickering flames. Thomas watched her, seeing the determination and wisdom in her eyes. "You have changed this place," he said quietly. "Not just the ranch, but me. I feel stronger, braver, and more aware because of you." Aylin looked at him with a faint smile. "We help each other," she said. "You have strength too, Thomas. You have faced this land alone for many years. Together, we are stronger. And that is what matters." Thomas nodded, realizing the truth in her words. The desert had always been harsh and unforgiving, but with Aylin's guidance, it had become a place of learning, growth, and courage. He understood now that survival was not only about physical skill, it was about trust, partnership, and understanding the land and those who walk it with you. And so, the nights continued, with the two of them sitting by the fire, planning, preparing, and learning from each other. Though danger still lingered on the horizon, Thomas felt a new sense of confidence. With Aylin by his side, he knew they could face whatever came together. The desert no longer seemed endless and lonely. It was a place where courage, loyalty, and wisdom could grow, shaping both of them in ways they had never imagined. The days on the ranch passed with a rhythm that was both comforting and demanding. Thomas and Aylin had settled into a routine, yet each day brought new lessons and discoveries. The desert, which once seemed harsh and unyielding, was beginning to reveal its secrets to Thomas through Aylin's guidance. She had a way of noticing things that most people overlooked: the subtle tracks of animals, the whisper of the wind through the grass, the signs of rain far beyond the horizon. One morning, Aylin led Thomas to a hidden grove along the river. The sunlight filtered through the sparse trees, creating patterns of light and shadow on the ground. She knelt down and began gathering plants and herbs, explaining their uses carefully. "These can heal small cuts," she said, holding up a leaf. "This one will soothe a fever. The desert provides everything, if you know where to look." Thomas listened closely, realizing that her knowledge was not only practical, but deeply rooted in observation and respect for the land. He tried to remember each detail, but he also understood that it would take years to truly know the desert as she did. As they returned to the ranch, Thomas asked her gently, "Aylin, you know so much. Where did you learn all this?" She looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. "From my family. From my people. We watch. We listen. We learn. We do not take what the land gives lightly. We respect it. Respect is everything." Thomas nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. He had grown up learning the ways of the ranch, but her lessons were different. They were about patience, awareness, and understanding that life was connected. People, animals, land, and weather were all part of the same balance. Over the next few days, Thomas began to notice changes in himself. He moved more carefully across the land, paying attention to the sounds of the wind and the tracks in the sand. He watched the animals with more care, learning to read their movements and anticipate their needs. Aylin's presence had changed not only the ranch but also him. He felt more alert, more patient, and more connected to the land than ever before. One afternoon, as the sun rose high in the sky, Aylin suggested they check the southern pasture. The path was rough, winding through rocky terrain and thorny brush. Thomas struggled at first, unaccustomed to moving so carefully and deliberately, But Aelin guided him with patience. "Move slowly," she instructed. "The land tells its story, if you take the time to listen." They reached a small clearing where the cattle had grazed. Aelin pointed out tracks he had not noticed, showing him the subtle signs of animals moving through the area during the night. Thomas marveled at her skill, realizing that she could read the land like a book, seeing what others would miss entirely. As they worked together, Thomas began to understand something deeper about Aelin. Her knowledge of the land was not just about survival, it was about respect, responsibility, and awareness. He realized that her courage came not from recklessness but from understanding and preparation. She faced danger with a calm mind because she knew the land, the animals, and the people around her. That evening, as they sat by the fire outside the cabin, Thomas asked her about her family. Aelin hesitated for a moment, then spoke quietly. "My parents. They taught me everything I know. They wanted me to be strong, to survive, to help others. I ran because it was necessary. But I carry their lessons with me. Every step I take, I think of them." Thomas listened, feeling a deep respect for her. She was more than brave. She was thoughtful, loyal, and wise beyond her years. He realized that he had been alone on the ranch for too long, focused on work and survival, but never truly understanding the deeper connections that life offered. Over time, the bond between them grew stronger. Thomas found himself relying on Aelin not only for her skills, but also for her insight and perspective. She had a way of seeing the world that was both practical and profound. And her presence encouraged him to think more deeply about his own life. One day, while repairing a fence, Thomas paused to watch Aelin move among the cattle. She approached a restless bull with calm confidence, speaking softly and using small gestures to guide it back to the herd. Thomas marveled at her patience and control. "You have a gift," he said quietly. Aelin looked at him with a faint smile. "It is not a gift," she replied. "It is practice, observation, understanding. Anyone can learn it, but it takes time and attention." Thomas realized that her lessons were not limited to the ranch or the desert. They applied to life itself. Patience, observation, respect, and courage were qualities that could guide anyone through challenges, no matter how difficult. As the days turned into weeks, the ranch became more than a place of work. It became a classroom, a sanctuary, and a place of growth. Thomas and Aelin worked side by side, learning from each other and strengthening their partnership. He began to see the land not as a challenge to conquer but as a living, breathing entity that required respect and understanding. One evening, a storm began to brew over the desert. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and the wind picked up, carrying dust and the scent of rain. Thomas and Aelin worked quickly to secure the animals and reinforce the fences. Aelin moved with confidence, anticipating the storm's path and guiding Thomas with calm precision. When the first raindrops fell, Thomas felt a sense of awe. The storm was fierce, but they were prepared. He realized that their success was not just due to skill or luck, it was due to trust, cooperation, and respect for the land and each other. Aelin's teachings had transformed him, and he felt a deep gratitude for her guidance and presence. After the storm passed, the desert was refreshed, and the air smelled of clean earth and rain. Thomas and Aelin walked among the cattle, checking each one carefully. Thomas noticed how much more confident he had become, how much more aware of the land and its rhythms. He realized that he had learned not only to survive but to thrive, and that his life had been forever changed by Aelin's presence. That night, as the stars sparkled in the clear desert sky, Thomas and Aelin sat by the fire, reflecting on the days that had passed. "I never thought I could learn so much," Thomas admitted, "not just about the land, but about life, courage, and trust." Aelin smiled softly. "We help each other," she said. "I teach you, and you teach me. Life is about learning, observing, and growing. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is moving forward even when fear is present." Thomas nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He had faced many challenges in his life, But none had taught him more than these weeks on the ranch with Aylin. She had changed the way he saw the world, the land, and himself. In the following days, Thomas noticed something remarkable. The ranch itself seemed to respond to their care and attention. The cattle were healthier, the fences stronger, and the land more productive. He realized that Aylin's influence extended beyond their partnership. It had transformed the ranch into a place of balance, respect, and growth. As they worked together, Thomas began to understand that life was not about domination or control, but about harmony, cooperation, and awareness. Aylin had shown him the power of patience, observation, and courage. He felt a deep gratitude for her presence, knowing that she had not only taught him practical skills, but also invaluable lessons about life, loyalty, and trust. One afternoon, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and red, Thomas and Aylin sat quietly on a hill overlooking the ranch. The wind carried the scent of dry earth and distant flowers. Thomas realized that their journey together had changed him in ways he could never have imagined. "You have made a difference," he said quietly. "Not just in the ranch, but in me. I feel stronger, wiser, and more aware because of you." Aylin looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "We help each other," she said simply. "That is all anyone can do. Learn, observe, help, and grow. Life is about balance and respect. Remember that, and you will always find your way." Thomas nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. The desert was no longer a lonely, harsh place. It was a living, breathing world filled with lessons, challenges, and beauty. And with Aylin by his side, he knew they could face anything together, learning and growing with each passing day. The desert morning was calm, with a soft breeze carrying the scent of dry earth and blooming desert flowers. Thomas woke early, as he always did, and found Aylin already up. She stood at the edge of the ranch, looking toward the distant hills, her dark hair catching the first light of dawn. There was a quiet determination in her posture, a sense that she had made a decision long before the day began. Thomas approached her cautiously, sensing a change in the air. "Aylin?" he asked gently. "Is everything all right?" She turned to him, her eyes calm but serious. "Thomas, I have to go," she said softly. "My people, my family, they need me. I cannot stay here forever, even though I want to." Thomas felt a sudden tightness in his chest. He had grown used to her presence, her guidance, and her friendship. The thought of her leaving filled him with unease. "But the ranch, the work we've done, all of it," he began, struggling to find the right words. Aylin stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on his arm. "I know," she said, "and I am grateful for everything. But my duty is with my people. They need me to return, to share what I have learned, and to help protect them. I cannot ignore that responsibility." Thomas nodded slowly, understanding her words even as he felt the weight of her absence already. Over the past weeks, she had become more than a helper. She had become a teacher, a friend, and a guide. Her presence had changed the ranch, the land, and his own life. He realized that her departure would leave a gap, but he also knew that she was right. Her loyalty to her family and her people was unwavering, and he could not hold her back. Aylin began packing her few belongings, careful to leave nothing behind. She moved with quiet efficiency, her actions reflecting the same thoughtfulness and preparation that had guided her since the day she arrived. Thomas watched her, feeling a mixture of admiration and sadness. Before leaving, Aylin took Thomas to the lookout point overlooking the ranch. The land stretched endlessly before them, the river winding through the desert, the cattle grazing peacefully, and the fences standing strong. She pointed to each part of the ranch, as if marking the places where her presence had mattered most. "You have grown, Thomas," she said softly, "not just as a rancher, but as a person. You have learned to see the land, to listen, to respect. Remember what I have taught you. Trust yourself, and trust the land. It will guide you if you are willing to listen. Thomas felt a lump in his throat. He had learned so much from her, not only about the land and survival but about courage, patience, and understanding. Her lessons went far beyond practical skills. They had changed the way he saw life itself. "I will never forget you, Aylin," he said quietly. Aylin smiled faintly, a mixture of sadness and warmth in her eyes. "And you have taught me too," she said. "You taught me that trust can be given and that kindness can come from unexpected places. We have learned from each other, and that is what matters." The time came to leave. Aylin mounted a small horse she had brought with her, glancing back at the ranch one last time. Thomas stood silently, watching as she rode toward the distant hills, her figure gradually becoming smaller against the vast desert landscape. He felt a deep sense of loss but also pride. She was strong, brave, and determined, and she was returning to her people to continue the life she had been destined for. As the days passed without her, Thomas began to notice the lessons she had left behind. The ranch seemed to flow more smoothly under his care. The cattle were healthier, the fences sturdier, and the land more productive. He realized that Aylin's influence was not tied to her physical presence. It had been woven into the very way he approached the ranch and the land. He began to apply the skills she had taught him, observing the land with new eyes, listening to the sounds of the desert, and anticipating the needs of the animals. Each decision he made was guided by her teachings, and he felt a sense of confidence and clarity he had never known before. At night, Thomas would often sit by the fire, thinking of Aylin. He remembered her bravery, her wisdom, and her quiet strength. He felt a deep gratitude for her presence in his life, knowing that she had changed him in ways he could never fully express. The desert, once lonely and harsh, now felt alive with the lessons she had imparted and the memories of their shared experiences. One evening, as the stars twinkled in the clear desert sky, Thomas realized something important. Aylin's departure was not an ending but a beginning. She had returned to her people, carrying the skills, courage, and wisdom she had shared with him. And he, in turn, would continue to honor her teachings, nurturing the land, protecting the ranch, and living with the awareness and respect she had shown him. Thomas began to document what he had learned from Aylin, writing down her lessons about the land, the animals, and survival. He wanted to ensure that her knowledge would not be lost, and that future generations, whether of his family or others who might come to the ranch, could benefit from her wisdom. Months passed, and the seasons changed. The desert experienced its harsh summer heat, and then the cooler, calmer months. The ranch thrived under Thomas's care, and he felt a connection to the land deeper than ever before. He understood that this transformation had come not from his efforts alone but from the lessons and guidance of a remarkable young girl who had walked into his life unexpectedly and changed it forever. One day, while walking along the riverbank, Thomas noticed tracks that reminded him of Aylin's presence. They were faint but familiar, the careful, deliberate marks of someone who understood the land completely. He smiled, feeling a sense of peace. Though she was far away, he knew she was out there, continuing her journey, using her skills and courage to protect her family and people. Thomas reflected on the journey they had shared. He thought of the day he first found her tied by the river, her brave words ringing in his ears. "Untie me, I will serve you with all I have." At the time, he had been stunned, unsure what to make of her offer. Now, he understood the depth of her promise. She had given him not only her skills and knowledge but also her trust, loyalty, and friendship. And in return, she had inspired him to grow, learn, and become a better person. The ranch continued to prosper, and Thomas often shared stories of Aylin with travelers and neighbors who came by. He spoke of her courage, intelligence, and wisdom, making sure that her lessons lived on. Her influence became a permanent part of the ranch, embedded in the fences, the grazing paths, and the way he approached every task. Years later, Thomas would still remember Aylin, the Apache girl who had arrived unexpectedly and changed everything. He would remember her bravery, her insight, and the way she had taught him to see the desert as a living, breathing world full of lessons, challenges, and beauty. And though she had returned to her people, her presence remained with him in every sunrise, every rustle of the wind, and every ripple of the river. The story of Aylin and Thomas became one of quiet courage, respect, and understanding, a testament to the power of trust, loyalty, and learning from those who walk beside you. The desert, once harsh and lonely, had become a place of growth, knowledge, and enduring friendship. And Thomas knew, deep in his heart, that the lessons she had left behind would continue to guide him for the rest of his life. As the sun set on another day, Thomas stood on the hill overlooking the ranch. The sky glowed with gold and orange. The river shimmered in the fading light, and the cattle grazed peacefully below. He felt a quiet gratitude, knowing that he had been part of something extraordinary. Aylin had changed the course of his life, and through her, he had discovered courage, wisdom, and the true meaning of loyalty. And somewhere beyond the distant hills, Aylin rode free, carrying her knowledge, courage, and love for her people, forever connected to the ranch, the land, and the man who had trusted her when the desert itself seemed uncertain.